he did it, period. And, finding a knife that was buried somewhere, and all of a sudden the story morphs into this national story, and all of a sudden police officials are concerned, and they're talking about testing the knife as if that's going to do anything at this late stage. I mean, I could, without doing any testing at all, like I said, in about 3 seconds, that has no value whatsoever. Now, Joe mentioned something which I was not aware of. He said that the main person, or the person that performed the autopsy, is this right, Joe? Who was still working for the medical examiner's office, did not testify at the trial, but his supervisor testified?
Yes. Yeah,
no,
that's very
I find that sounds very peculiar to me. Unless there was some underlying reason for that. I'm sure there was more than one person present at the autopsy. And maybe that other guy was present at the autopsy and saw the whole thing and therefore was capable of giving, competent testimony. But, if he was not present, what is he doing? He's relying on notes that were prepared by somebody else, which is essentially a form of hearsay. I find that strange. I would like to read more about that, because there must be some explanation that has not been provided for, that occurrence happening. I find that strange.
The medical examiner that did the autopsy, you can reference this. His last name is Golden. It's Golden. And the chief medical examiner, who is no longer the chief, his name is either a Middle Eastern, I think it's an Indian name, starts with a Z, and it's about a foot long. I never can pronounce it correctly. I don't want to do a disservice to it, but he's actually the person that testified in the case. And you can actually go onto YouTube and see this testimony. You can see Golden's pretrial testimony.
There were a couple people that testified.
The chief medical examiner's testimony.
There were about 3 or 4 people that testified in the pretrial that didn't get called. One that said that they saw OJ throwing out things, which was probably stuff related to the killings when he was on his way to Chicago. But doesn't sound like Marsha Clark did a very good job. I think Alex, you would have did a better job, and that's not saying much, but
a lot of these people had carrots dangled in front of their face, and she didn't. I'm not trying to defend what Marsha did, but this is a story. Even if you're the DA, you don't have the ability to police people 24/7. There were I think 2 of these people that were given money by tabloid people to tell their story, and automatically that negates their ability to give a testimony. And and forgive me, my memory's slipping. I'm sure somebody in the audience knows, but 2 of these people I know right off the top that were really essential.
That guy Cato, whatever his name is.
Cato.
That was after the fact. These were 2 critical pieces that were not allowed, or you weren't. The jury was not allowed to hear their testimony. They weren't.
She didn't even introduce the Bronco drive as part of testimony. I mean, the glove thing, that was Christopher Darden's idea. We now learn from Marsha Clark, courtesy of Dateline. She basically threw it on him. But as Carl, the co-counsel, says, you never, and you probably agree with this, Carl Douglas, you never do a demonstration in front of a live jury. Right, Alex?
You know what? That applies most of the time. But I'll tell you when it would not apply. It would not apply if you're trying a case and, you've got a reasonable chance, there's reasonable doubt lurking here and there. Yeah, you wouldn't want to do it. But if you're trying a case and the evidence is coming at you like, 500-pound bombs, and it's looking very grave, then you start taking very serious chances and gambles because you have nothing to lose. And in that case, you may, out of an act of legal or trial or strategic desperation, say, hey, let's perform an experiment. You may not even think that you have a chance of winning. But since you have nothing to lose, you ask the person on the witness stand to do something or show something. And what if they fail? What if it happens to be that they fail? You may, at that point, have turned the tide of the trial. You may be able to tell the jury, oh, this case looked really strong, ladies and gentlemen. It looked very powerful. They came here with this piece of evidence and that piece of evidence, and they had this witness and they had that witness and this cop and this detective. But when push came to shove, right in front of you, live, when the moment of truth came, you know what? They failed. They failed. And that tells you everything you need to know about this case. That's when you
Alex,
would perform that type of experiment.
You've seen Juan Martinez in action. Seeing him in action, do you think if he was the prosecution for Los Angeles that OJ would have been found guilty?
Yeah, I think that he's certainly a competent prosecutor, although I thought he got a little bit, there was a lot of histrionics there with him. But if he was somehow able to control the drama, I think he is a talented guy, and I'm pretty sure he seemed like he was more prepared than Marcia Clark and Darden to me. Marcia Clark and Darden, to me, they just didn't seem like they were up to the game in terms of trying this case. But I think the attorney that you just mentioned, I believe he probably would have been a better job. But this is all speculation.
Cochran was so good.
Cochran,
I have to.
yeah, he's a showman. He was a big showman.
I have to compare it to, in my mind at least, as a layman when it comes to the law, and plus putting a splash of expertise in forensics in it. If you're trying to get from point A to point B, we could, and say we had to travel 1,000 miles. If I've got an old pickup truck that's running sound, that's in great shape, it's been restored, and I've got a Mercedes that's brand new and is uber complicated, high-end engine. It looks really cool. It's comfortable to ride in. And I'm trying to get to point A to point B. The pickup truck is going to get you there. And if it breaks down, you might can repair it. The engine is simpler. The components are simpler. I compare the prosecutor's case in the OJ Simpson trial to the Mercedes. It had all of these big bells and whistles. They wanted to talk about DNA. They wanted to talk about all this procedural stuff and the forensic science. They were going to try to dazzle and whiz-bang everybody in the court. And at the end of the day, because they dove in, not knowing how deep the rabbit hole goes, it wound up eating them up in the end. Alex is right. They were unprepared. I think they were out of their depth. They just, I don't think they really realized how the magnitude. For some reason, I don't understand. I don't think that they understood all of the nuts and bolts of what they were trying to do. And it's not just about the science itself. It's about how that jury was going to react to all of the stuff that was going to be thrown at them. And then you create the media circus that goes along with it, with Ito having the cameras in the court, and just day after day after day. You knew it was going to be a nightmare from the beginning when these people were selling stories that were going to be witnesses.
Joe, you know what that's called? There's a term. You just described prosecutors. They bring in all this overwhelming evidence. There's a term that's used, that defense attorneys used, or it is used it's called over-trying your case. Instead of presenting the sufficient amount of evidence that you need, these people go way above and beyond and submit all kinds of other evidence that you don't need. I don't even know if any DNA evidence was ever needed to be tested by the prosecution in this case, because there was so much other evidence. Right?
Oh, my God.
Instead, when they started going with this whole DNA thing, all they did was start create issues for the defense, because the defense starts hiring their own experts. And, you know, with DNA stuff, you can argue things from here to infinity and start confusing the jury and leading them to believe there was some, you know, grave deficiency. But prosecutors and some defense attorneys make that mistake all the time. They over-try their case. They go way above, calling too many witnesses, too many detectives, too many investigators. And after a while, the jury becomes dizzy and tired, and they don't know what to think, and they become disoriented. And what does the defense do? Like a bunch of sharks, they take advantage of that. And they end up winning some cases like that, as they did in this case.
Yes, they did. They truly did. And look, you know, I've had a lot of friends say, well, what do you think about the OJ Simpson case? You know, are you upset about it? You know, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, no, I'm not upset about it. You know, I hate it because people died, but the reality is that Cochran and Shapiro did what they were hired to do. They got a not guilty verdict, and the system worked from that perspective. Did Clark fail? Yeah. You know, Marcia failed and Darden failed. They failed to prosecute their case and get a conviction, but in the end, Cochran did what he was hired to do. I'm not saying that you could sit across the table and in confidence have a conversation with any of the people on the defense team, God rest Johnny Cochran's soul, but in a friendly conversation, they would say, yeah, man, I think he's guilty. But, you know, having a cup of coffee with these people is not seen as being in court. They represented their client, and they did a fantastic job. And what's really great about the whole thing in the end is that the people in forensics we benefited from, because we got our head handed to us, and we wound up learning lessons from it. And hopefully it's stuff that we're still applying today.
No question about it. Okay, our final story talks about a tennis superstar failing a drug test. Let's listen to this and talk
I wanted
about
to let you know that a few days ago I received a letter from the ITF that I had failed a drug test at the Australian Open. I did fail the test, and I take full responsibility for it. For the past 10 years, I have been given a medicine called Mildronate by my doctor, by my family doctor. And a few days ago, after I received the ITF letter, I found out that it also has another name of meldonium, which I did not know. It's very important for you to understand that for 10 years, this medicine was not on WADA's ban list, and I had been legally taking the medicine for the past 10 years. But on January 1st, the rules had changed, and meldonium became a prohibited substance, which I had not known. I was given this medicine by my doctor for several health issues that I was having back in 2006. I was getting sick a lot. I was getting the flu every couple of months. I had irregular EKG results, as well as indications of diabetes with a family history of diabetes. I thought it was very important for me to come out and speak about this in front of all of you, because throughout my long career I have been very open and honest about many things, and I take great responsibility and professionalism in my job every single day, and I made a huge mistake, and I've let my fans down. I've let the sport down that I've been playing since the age of 4, that I love so deeply. I know that with this I face consequences, and I've I don't want to end my career this way, and